What's good, guys? IG Squad here, and welcome to vlog 3 of the IG Squad summer vlogs. Probably not gonna be as much of a vlog as last week, but we should still have a fun time here. We'll still be hanging out, so yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to say in the intro. Let's go and get into it. Alright, so we are coming off a couple things from last week. First, Pirates game of the season. Also, May Phone Diving Adventures is done. You guys will see that video at the beginning, second week in June after the collection update comes out. Just, scheduling purposes. And yeah, so right now I actually have to edit last week's vlog. I haven't even done that yet and get it up today. So that'll be fun. And yeah, and I figured with these vlogs I would sort of, try to record on different phones each week. So this week I'm going to be recording this entire vlog, hopefully, if nothing goes wrong with this phone, on my Google Pixel 3 XL. So we'll see how this goes. This does have a bit of a messed up one front-facing camera, but the good thing with this Pixel is that it has two front-facing cameras. So even if one of them goes bad, I can use the other one, and this other one here is an ultra wide, so that's kind of cool. So we're gonna be using this week, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, let's go and get into the week's vlog. So I found this SD card just kind of lying around upstairs, and I tried plugging it into my computer, and it said card was unreadable. I'm not really sure why. So I'm gonna try throwing it in my phone here. If it doesn't work in here, that's gonna suck because it's a 32 gig micro SD card. So if that's a complete loss, then that's unfortunate, man. Because I'd love to have that to put in some of my lower end phones. I mean, I have plenty of SD cards, but a lot of these are like 2 gig cards, 4 gig cards. I have a couple 16 gigs, but like still, it's not a lot when you collectively add it up. So hopefully I can get this to work inside my phone. Alright, so I plugged it in and it says SD card is unsupported, but it says tap to set it up in the right format. So I guess we'll go ahead and just format it and see if we can get it to do anything here. Alright, yeah, so now it says it's ready to use, so I mean, obviously now it's but let's see. I mean, I'm sure there's nothing on it. Yeah, now that it's formatted. So now it should be fine to use. I tried to format it through my computer, but it wasn't showing up at all, so I couldn't get it to do it. But now that it's formatted like this, it looks like it'll work fine. So, I mean, alright. Alright, so now for some reason, now that I remove the card from the S10, now it wants it to restart to avoid data loss on the phone itself, which that doesn't make any sense, but we'll go with it, I guess. I mean, I'm not, trying to have it just restart out of nowhere. But, yeah, that's kind of weird. So, there's a little problem with my Pixel 3 XL. It's with this main selfie camera. When I switch to the ultra wide though, it's fine, but it still makes that absolutely horrible noise. I don't know if this camera's water damaged or what's going on, but it's done this since I bought it last year. So I don't know. Oh, look at that! It actually stopped, but it doesn't really matter. I'm still gonna use this ultra wide front-facing camera. It's only 0.7x on this ultra wide, which is a little weird. Anyways, that's besides the point. I haven't really done a whole lot today. The vlog's not going out till tomorrow, which is fine. But yeah, I was probably gonna just hang out for the rest of the night, watch Game 7 of the Seattle Kraken versus Dallas Stars series, because that's been fun. Game 7 and the Seattle Kraken in their first playoff season have a chance to go to the Western Conference Final. And it would be an all-expansion team, WCF, which would be sick. So, yeah, we'll see how this goes. All right, so it's the next day. It's pretty slow morning. Haven't really done a whole lot. I have to finish editing last week's vlog right now so I can get it up today, hopefully. And yeah, but while I'm doing that, while I'm kind of off working, I only put half of the purpose of last week's video into it because it ended up being super long. So I'm gonna go ahead and put in part 2 right now so you can watch that. So enjoy. Okay, dramatic shift. Now we move over to the LG Rumor Reflex. Yes, I was able to get photos off of my dumb phones. Oh wait, I already did some of my dumb phones, so you guys know that. But it shows its age. This phone came out in 2012, for perspective. I mean, just glaringly obvious exposure issues. Like it's just blowing out like everything in the background. That one's a little bit better, but it's still not that great. There's really not much detail. It's a wide angle, I'll say that. Yeah, back to just blowing everything out. It does have a solid angle camera, because this is an older shot that I used to test cameras when I sort of initially get them. It doesn't look bad from afar. It's a little soft, but that's okay. Yeah, the camera on this is actually pretty wide. It's a 2.72 millimeter focal length, which that's pretty good for back in 2012. Like, I mean, I guess having a wider angle camera as your only camera was sort of considered the norm in 2012. I don't really know. But yeah, I mean, it's still a low quality photo. It struggles with a lot, but 4 out of 10. At least it tried. And sticking with the rumors, we have the LG Rumor Touch. So I think the Rumor Touch is a little bit older than the Rumor Reflex. This looks like a very similar shot to the QUAD Catalyst. But this one, it's a little more acceptable because it's not, an Android phone from 2015. I mean, it's not good. It doesn't look good. These earlier shots, actually, they don't look that bad, though. These definitely would bring its score up. Unbiasing, maybe a little bit warm, but these are actually really solid. The early shots are pretty solid, but then the ones that I just took today are they just feel so much like that QUAD Catalyst. Like it's not great. 3.5 out of 10. It's hard to compare these to modern phones because, they don't have the same sensors like at all. All right, we got a bunch of LGs here. Now we have the LG 306G. Okay, interesting. Not a lot of detail. There's really no dynamic range. Ooh, yeah, exposure issues for that's just blowing everything out. You can't make out what half that is in that damn photo. So this feels like it has more exposure issues than even the last two. Ooh, that's struggling. Wow, that's rough. And some of the previous photos that I've actually taken on the 306G, they've won in camera tests. Like I think I put it up toe to toe with like a Galaxy S6, and it won like almost unanimously, which is kind of impressive. But that was a very well lit shot in just a ton of natural lighting. None of this is really. I mean, it's lighting from the sun, but it's not really all that natural. So I don't really know. 3 out of 10. those exposures, you just kill it. Okay, I don't know how to judge this one. The LG Phoenix 3. So I did take them on both my Phoenix 3s, but I only see data from one of them, I think. Maybe not. I don't know. No, I think this is only one of them. This is all the one that's all kind of messed up, so it's got, this camera has so many problems, it's kind of hard to judge it. I would need to look at the other one, because I just took that today. I mean, it's trying to make out detail as best as it can, but I don't think I'm going to be able to give this one a rating because the camera's so screwed up. It just needs a lot of help. Okay, now we have, this could be either of the Cosmos 2s or Cosmos 3, or Cosmos 2 or either of the Cosmos 3s. I mean, they're basically the same sensor, so I'm not really going to, have much of a difference between the two. Yep, that's an old camera. So, for reference, the Cosmos 2 came out in 2011. That's when the sensor, I think, was really first used, at least in the Cosmos, because I don't think the original Cosmos or the Cosmos Touch used the same sensor. And then the Cosmos 3 came out in 2013. So, if we're talking 2011, this is a kind of a typical dumb phone camera. But if we're talking 2013, this is pretty bad. Like, yikes. This is not a good camera. This is really not a good camera. And even the fucked up Cosmos 3, the scratches and paint problems, it just, there's so many issues with that camera. It just looks like absolute shit. 1.5 out of 10. Like, the Cosmos 2, most of the Cosmos line, I mean, the original Cosmos and the Cosmos Touch were cool, but the Cosmos 2 and 3 were just not very good phones. Yeah, 1.5 out of 10. These cameras are terrible. Okay, I had to look up this model number. This is the LG Extrovert. That's an improvement over the Cosmos. So I think this is a 2 megapixel camera. Let's see. Yeah, it's 1600 by 1200, and I think the other ones are 1024 by, or 1280 by 960 is their max resolution, and this one is 1600 by 1200. So it's still not that great, but it's doing a lot better with balancing the color over the Cosmos. That one's biasing a little cool, but it's probably trying to pull as much color from the background as it can. So, I mean, better than the Cosmos, but still a cheap, still an old LG dumb phone. 2.5 out of 10. I don't really know what else to say. It's a dumb phone, and it does dumb phone things. Okay, and we have the Extrovert's younger brother, which is the Extrovert 2. I'm sure this is not going to be much better. Whoa. Hello. Not what I wanted to do. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I was right. It's not much better. That needs rotated. Yeah, wow. Honestly, this practice shot is... no, it's actually really not that great. It's so soft. I'd probably give it the same rating, 2.5 out of 10. I mean, it's a dumb phone camera. Okay, we're going a little old school now. Now we have the LG VX8700. Whoa, what the hell? What did I just do? V turns it black and white? Okay. Why does that look like somewhat better than the last two? It's not good, but actually that's not that bad for a dumb phone camera. That's actually kind of okay. It's kind of passable. I mean, it's still low quality, but it's not like it's softening anything too hard. That's actually kind of okay. I'll give it a 3.5 out of 10. That's all right. It's okay. Okay, now we're shifting back to smartphones. One more LG. We have the LG Rebel 4. Ooh. For one of those cheap prepaid phones, this is probably the best camera. So this is an 8 megapixel camera. There's a fine amount of detail. I mean, there isn't a ton of dynamic range, and it still has some exposure trouble, but not actually as much as I was expecting. This isn't that bad, and I think it does have an HDR mode. I don't think... No, it might have automatic HDR. So what I tried to do in terms of HDR, for the most part, I tried to keep it off, because I didn't want it, like super enhancement or anything like that. If it had an automatic mode, I left it on because I didn't really care. And then with phones that have older styles of HDR, like the Z10, it wouldn't turn it on automatically, but it would detect when to turn on HDR when it sort of, like contrasting lighting scenarios. So I just said, yeah, I'll turn it on. So that's a bit of a variable with HDR photos, but honestly, that's not bad. Okay, so this one, it's not that great. It doesn't do super well from a distance, but it's actually not doing well in this sort of low light scenario. It's not doing that bad. Like, it's handling it okay. It's maybe on the exterior shots it's trying to over sharpen just a little, but not really. Like, it's really pretty solid. I mean, like I said, there isn't a ton of dynamic range, but that's really not that bad. I'd give this... The interior shots hurt it because it just doesn't do well from a distance, but 5.5 out of 10. This is passable. This is definitely a usable photo. As long as I do, like some minor highlighting edits, then should be okay. That's a bug. Bye, Buggy. We don't tolerate bugs here. Okay, now we're finally shifting brands. We'll move on to Moto. We're gonna start with the Moto E5. Okay. So it's sort of struggling with exposure in the foreground. Not terrible, but this is reasonably sharp. Maybe like slightly over sharpened. It's actually a little bit better, maybe. I don't know. It's like maybe a touch over sharpened and like a touch oversaturated. It still has some exposure struggles. Like, it looks like the street is just, covered in snow. Let's move on to ooh. Yeah, so these interior shots it's not doing well with. It's really struggling in that low light scenario to pick up anything sort of on the side of the frame, like it's meant to be the background, but is sort of in more of a foreground space, if that makes any sense. Yeah, it's really, really struggling to pick up the subject in a decent manner. Yeah, not great. The sun is also kind of bouncing off of it in a weird way. 4.5 out of 10, maybe a 5. It's okay. Those outside shots aren't terrible. Those are definitely usable, but not amazing. All right, now we have the Moto G5S Plus. Now this phone does have dual cameras, but the second sensor is just a depth sensor, but that may help things. And actually, this is pretty decent. So I think it's definitely oversaturated. A little, I wouldn't say too much for my liking, but it's kind of bordering on that. Like, it really is bringing out the greens in a heavy way. The sun is kind of reflecting in just all the right ways. Like, it kind of got lucky. Exposure, sort of struggling with the sky. Yeah, it's still sort of struggling with exposure, kind of in a bad way. But dynamic range, honestly, is pretty solid here. Like, this looks good. Interior shot, still kind of struggling with the low light aspect, but that's a much sharper subject, and that's a pretty decently wide angle. I may have been taking it from a distance. 3.59 millimeter focal length, not super wide, but not terrible. For comparison, the Moto E is 3.2, so it's actually a little bit wider. I mean, it's not bad. 6 out of 10. It's decent. Moto that's always been kind of the one weakness of Moto phones, is their cameras, but this doesn't look too bad. All right, now we have the Moto G Power, which is a strange camera setup. So it has a main camera and ultra wide, and I think the last one is like a 2 megapixel macro camera. I didn't use that because it only records macro video. Ooh. So I'm looking at the ultra wide shots right now, and this does not look good. It's really underexposed in kind of every area. Like, there's like no dynamic range. It's really soft in a lot of areas. Yeah, this is not a great shot from this ultra wide lens. Oh, it's even more underexposed in this shot. Ouch, I was not expecting that. This one's a little bit better, but yeah, it's still underexposing almost everything it sees. Okay, so moving on to the main camera. Still underexposing a good portion of the foreground, but that may be the way sun's hitting it too. But that's a lot sharper. Like that, there's actually a lot of detail. I have some of the original test shots I used when I first got this phone. It was actually really, really solid. Like there was a good amount of detail. There was a good amount of dynamic range. And that reflects here. This main camera is really, really good, but this ultra wide is kind of killing it. I'm not gonna lie. Exposure does get better here. It does get better here. That dynamic range really, really sort of pops. It's not oversaturated really in any way. Maybe like a touch. Maybe a touch. Maybe just a touch. But no, this looks good. This main camera is actually really solid. This is probably the best moto camera I've ever seen. I don't know, this is a phone from 2020, so it's still a little out of date, but that looks pretty good. It's still struggling with the low light. But yeah, that ultra wide does not look good. So if I'm rating the two cameras, the ultra wide gets like a 2.5 out of 10, but the main camera, probably a 6.5 out of 10, maybe even a 7. If I'm feeling a little generous. Honestly, if you give the ultra wide enough light and enough, and a slightly simpler shot, it would probably do better. But these shots, it doesn't look good. But that main camera really is actually pretty nice. Okay, so yeah, wardrobe change. I'm doing this the next day. My battery was like dying on the S10 Plus, so I just had to wait it out. But it's all good. So we did the Moto G Power last night. Let's take a look at the Pixel 3 XL. Wow. Yeah. See, this is why I bought this Pixel 3 XL when I did, because the camera is just so freaking good. Like, so much detail, so much dynamic range. And even when you move over to 2x, because the Pixel 3 XL has a single lens that's obviously doing digital zoom between all that, but it really doesn't look like it when you use the 2x mode that's built into the Google Camera app. It really, really does well. Like, you can see there's just a good amount of detail. Dynamic range obviously does decrease, but it's not dramatic at all. Like, it really does look good. The processing algorithm from Google cameras are just on top of the game. Like, Pixel cameras are so good. I think this Pixel 3 XL camera, the Pixel 7a just came out, and that's apparently supposed to have like the new Pixel camera, the first time it's been like a whole new sensor since the Pixel 2. So that should be interesting to take a look at in testing. But this Pixel 3 XL camera is so good. And then moving to the inside shot, doesn't struggle with low light, doesn't struggle with detail at all. In this, you know, pretty challenging shot, it does really, really well. And I thought I took that photo at 2x, but I guess I did not, but that's okay. And I mean, it's not the widest focal length in the world. It's a 4.44 millimeter focal length. It would be nice to have an ultra wide on a phone that has such a good camera, but this main camera is just so good that it doesn't even really matter. It's awesome. Oh, rating. 9 out of 10. Pixel 3 camera is just so good. It has its occasional screw-ups because, you know, not every camera is perfect, but this is the closest that you can get to perfect. All right, dramatic shift incoming. Now we're moving over to the Motorola Razr V3 XX. So that came out in 2007, and you can't tell what that is because it's the darkest photo I've ever seen. Wow, that is bad. That is really bad. Okay, that's a little bit better. Struggles with exposure mightily. Oh boy. I mean, because of its age, you can't really give it too much. You know, these older phones are still in that made era where digital cameras were the main camera you used, and these were kind of just secondary. But yeah, there isn't really a whole much you have to look at because these cameras are just, they show their age and they're pretty bad. 3 out of 10 for effort. Yeah, it's not a good camera, but it's a 2007 camera, so. All right, sticking with the dumb phones, now we have the Samsung Alias 2. So, actually, that's not horrible. That's pretty decent. And it's pretty washed out, but that looks all right. You get up close. That needs rotated. Okay, there we go. I mean, there isn't a ton of detail. There's basically no dynamic range. It struggles badly with exposure. But the colors are actually pretty decent. It's picking up colors pretty well. It's doing okay with foreground exposure, not amazing. Struggles in low light, but this is definitely one of the better dumb phone cameras, I'll say. It picks up color really well. It can pick up some level of detail, not a high level of detail, but at some level. 4 out of 10. It's decent, but it's still a dumb phone camera. Okay, shifting back to smartphones and moving on to a bunch of Samsung smartphones. We're going to start with the Galaxy Mega 2. So I just got this phone pretty recently. Yee. Okay, so this one, focus struggles. Okay, there we go. That's a lot better. Okay, that's actually not that bad. Maybe over sharpening just a tad, but not. That's actually pretty decent for a mid-range phone. Struggling a bit with foreground exposure, but that could be because of the angle that I'm taking it at. Does struggle with some overexposure in the background, but not to an extreme extent. It's not like haloing, which is good. That one's biasing a little bit cool, maybe. Not terrible. So it seems like once you get into lower light, it's got a lot more motion blur issues than it does when you give it a fine amount of light, which, yeah, that's the way probably cameras should be. But the inside shots, they're okay. But actually, once you get past the first outside shot, which it really struggled with focus and motion blur, the autofocus on this phone is not fast by any means, but these are decent. 6 out of 10. It's pretty good amounts of detail. Not amazing, but for 2014 standards for mid-range phones, this is pretty okay. This is more than acceptable. All right, now we have the 891A. I believe that's the Galaxy S7 Active. So not great, actually. Not really a ton of detail there. It kind of feels like it doesn't have a ton of dynamic range at all, and it's struggling with exposure, with background exposure. Like it's blowing it out. That's picking it up a little bit better, but actually not that great. When I'm really looking at it here, it's not all that crispy. It looks a little bit better once you get into the inside shots, actually. Like it's really doing well with low light. I'd have to test the HDR on this phone because I'm not really sure how it looks. But it feels like it's kind of struggling with focus, maybe just a little bit. It looks good, but it's not great. I don't know, and it's really struggling to figure out those focus points. Probably gonna have to give that a 5.5. Man, I'll give it a 6 out of 10 because the interior shots are pretty good. Yeah, I'll give it a 6 out of 10, but those outside shots are not all that impressive. They look okay, but they do need some help with focusing. Okay, now we have the standard Galaxy S7. It almost looks like they're kind of doing the same thing. I remember when the Galaxy S7 first came out, it was considered the best smartphone camera. It was so good. This is a challenging shot. I mean, it looks fine. That one looks like it's biasing a little warm. It definitely looks okay, but there's not a ton of dynamic range in here, which is interesting. And it feels like this is more than the S7 Active is biasing kind of warm, which is interesting. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. It's good, but it's very close to the 6S in my eye. Definitely not what I was expecting. Interesting. Okay, so now we're moving on to some crappier Samsung smartphones. Here is the Galaxy Express 3, or the AT&T J1. So it's not the worst quality I've ever seen. There is a little bit of dynamic range in there, but you'd really have to squint to find it. But my God, there's so many exposure issues in here. It's just blowing out the background exposure, and just it's just so dark in the foreground. That's a little oversaturated too. Okay, that one's okay. But yeah, Samsung really sort of skimped out in terms of cameras on these lower phones when they were making such good cameras in 2016. I mean, these look okay. These are definitely somewhat usable, and I'd have to try more shots to really get an idea. But 4.5 out of 10. It's all right, but it's nothing special in any way. And in some of these outside shots, it actually doesn't look that great. It's just really struggling with exposure. Okay, we have the 2017 J7 on AT&T. AT&T part doesn't matter. It looks like it's over sharpening like a lot. Like, oof. I mean, the detail is definitely there, but yeah, it's really trying to over sharpen that. It looks good. Okay, that's a little bit better. So it's almost underexposing in some areas. Not in the typical areas either. But there is some dynamic range there. Okay, that's a little bit better. Yeah, just sort of bouncing around with the exposure a little bit. But it feels like in those first couple of shots, it was really trying to over sharpen, which kind of interesting for a Samsung camera. Okay, that's really underexposed. And it's just a giant white light in the sky. Oh man, yeah. It's really just sort of bouncing around the exposure column. I did take this on both of my J7 2017, so I don't really know how much of a difference it makes. Probably not much. Oh man. Yeah, this camera seems like it really struggles to find the right exposure a lot. 5 out of 10, because the detail is there, while being slightly over sharpened, but those exposure issues are just so strange and so uncommon that it's gonna lower its score. Okay, we're gonna move back to a couple of dumb phones. Now we have the Samsung Freeform 2. Yeah, that looks like a dumb phone camera. So it's actually doing okay with the foreground exposure. It's actually not doing too bad, although the sun may be helping it out a little bit. But it's just blowing everything out. I don't know if the sun is just too much for it to handle or what, but yeah. Ooh. And those interior shots are absolutely horrible. Yeah, those are not good. It's blowing everything out inside. Yikes. 3 out of 10. Because this might be some of the worst exposure problems I've seen. It's doing actually pretty decent when it comes to foreground exposure, like a lot better than I was expecting, but it's doing really, really bad with background exposure. All right, now we have the Samsung Intensity 2. Now I took a bunch of photos, and these are actually from some time ago, some of these, but the ones in this set that I took this week. What the hell is that? So that's biased extremely warm. You can't even make out what you're looking at. It just kind of looks like a Pixel cam, not a Google Pixel, you know what I mean? Youch, that's bad. That's really bad. Like, these shots look okay. But man, a lot of the shots I took in the set this week these don't look good at all. Biased extremely warm, struggling with exposure. Not as bad as the Freeform, but not good. But yeah, just the bad, like it's pulling all the warm tones it can and really trying to just crush it all together. So because of that, it's hard to make out what you're looking at. 1.5 out of 10. It's bad. It's really not good. This phone, you can tell it was meant for texting and basically nothing else. Okay, now we have U680. Which one is the U680? U680. That is the Samsung Convoy 3. Okay. So let's take a look. That's actually not that bad. There's some good detail in there. There's plenty of exposure struggle, but that looks okay. Definitely reasonable. Not usable, but reasonable. Struggling with foreground exposure a little bit, but not too bad, actually. There's some okay detail in there, and foreground detail is actually pretty solid. Like, that's not a terrible photo. That's a big improvement over the Intensity 2. Like, that's actually pretty decent. Maybe slightly oversaturated, but not bad. It's not trying to oversharpen. It's not trying to do anything too stupid. It's just trying to pull as much detail as it possibly can for a dumb phone camera. I give it a solid 4.5 out of 10. That's not bad at all. Like, for a dumb phone camera, it's one of the better ones I've seen. Okay, so now we have the Samsung Flight 2. Those shots actually don't look too bad. There's some okay detail in there. Not amazing. Oh boy. Yeah, that's a camera. That's definitely a camera. That's not very good. Wow, that's yeah, that's not good. That's not good. Oh boy. Oh wow. Yeah, so in these shots, yeah, you can't make out really any detail. It's biasing pretty warm. It's oversaturating like crazy. Let me take a look. Yeah, it's like dipping really badly over the mill. It's a pretty good focal length though, 2.73 millimeters. Not bad. And f2.7. That's okay. It doesn't look like, looking at the stats here, it doesn't really look like it should be overexposing all that much. It's, you know, ISO 50, the 1/170 shutter speed, which isn't, you know, super, super fast, but I guess that's fast enough for it to really sort of overexpose. So 2.5 out of 10. It's not great. All right, now we shift back to smartphones. Now we have the Galaxy S4. Okay, so there's some solid detail there, but it's kind of a typical older Samsung smartphone camera. Pretty oversaturated. Not over sharpening though. There's some good dynamic range there, so there's some pretty solid detail. It's a 13 megapixel camera. This is when they really started to get really serious with their cameras, was with the Galaxy S4. This looks good. It's good. Struggling with some background exposure a little bit, but the main thing that I notice when looking at these older Samsung cameras, and especially the S line, is that it's just really oversaturated. Okay, that's a little bit of underexposure, I'll say. But not extreme, not like the J7 was doing. Ooh, okay. Struggling in low light to really gather the right exposure. This doesn't look like a very wide, no, it's a 4.2 millimeter focal length. But it's an f2.2 aperture, which for 2013 is actually pretty good. Detail is there, exposure isn't really, but the detail is pretty good. So 5 out of 10. It's definitely, with some minor edits, it's definitely a good photo. But you'd have to make those minor edits. Okay, going a little bit older, now we have the Samsung Sidekick 4G. Wow. Biasing pretty cool. It's trying to pull a lot of cool tones. And my god, that exposure is absolutely horrendous. Oh, that's even worse. Wow. Yeah, you can't make out much of what's in that photo outside of the foreground. That's a little bit better, but yeah, it's really, really struggling with exposure. Like, it's overexposing too much. Way too much. That's a little bit better. Well, actually, no, it's not. It's struggling to gather a lot of the right focus points as well. Okay, this one is actually pretty decent. There's some good detail. This is taken through a window. Some solid dynamic range. But those exposure issues are just bad. Like, really, really bad. And it struggles in some shots with motion blur badly. So 3.5 out of 10. It's nothing to write home about, and struggling with exposure and motion blur mightily. And shifting time completely, now we have the Galaxy A20. So the A20 does have an ultra wide, which, okay, that's odd. It's blurring out one. Okay, that's a little bit better. So biasing a little warm, but not extreme. It's maybe a slight bit oversaturated. But it's actually doing pretty well with not overexposing, although it is pretty over sharpened if I'm looking at it. Like, almost uncharacteristically over sharpening. It's very interesting. That ultra wide is not good. It's really not that good. That's actually brutal. Yikes. So just no detail, no dynamic range at all. But yeah, that main camera is better, but it is over sharpening. Okay, so actually does pretty well in low light. That's not bad. It's doing okay. But that ultra wide is just not good. Like, man, It's really struggling. It's a good focal length. It's a 1.13 millimeter focal length, which is wider than the iPhone 13, and I think maybe slightly wider than the Galaxy S10. I'll have to take a look. But that ultra wide does kind of kill it. So 5.5 out of 10. It's good. It's not a high resolution either. It's a 2560 by 1184 on those shots. Well, on the ultra wide shots is its max. What? Why is one of my Z10s alive? Oh boy. Okay. Anyways, the main camera shots are 4128 by 1908, and that's still a 3.6 millimeter focal length. That's not bad. And an f1.9. That's not bad. Yeah, 5.5 out of 10. The ultra wide kills it, but the main camera, it looks good, but biasing warm and a little over sharpened. Okay, so this is going to be difficult to judge. Now we have the Galaxy S6, and there's actually a good amount of detail here, but my Galaxy S6 camera is pretty messed up. There's dirt in it. It's going to wash things out, but the detail is still there. It still looks good. Galaxy S6 camera was actually really solid. I can just get in there and clean it out a little bit, clean out the optics. That's a solid looking camera. Like, that is still very usable. It's overexposing maybe just a little bit, but not terribly actually. It's doing pretty well. I could probably do a little bit of red eye cleanup where it has some, like dirt spots, but that's not bad. That's actually pretty good. Like, the detail is definitely there. Ooh. So not great in low light, but not horrible, actually. You can still sort of make out what you're looking at. Yeah, these aren't bad, and it's doing well with detail. Maybe oversaturating a little bit, but not as bad as some of the others. I give that a solid 6.5 out of 10. It's still good for being a messed up camera. Alright, now let's go ahead and move on to the Galaxy S9, and yay. It's good looking, but actually over-sharpening just a little bit, maybe. There's still a good amount of detail, though. Good amount of dynamic range. I guess not. It looked to me like maybe it was over-sharpening just a bit, but not struggling with exposure, like, at all. Like, it's doing perfectly good when it comes to exposure. That's the best out of the Galaxy cameras we've seen so far. That's good. Doing reasonably well in low light. There's a good amount of detail there, though. That's pretty good. Actually, that's even better. Now I'm looking at it. Yeah, that's okay. I wouldn't say as good as the iPhone XR, but closely matched. I give it a 7 out of 10. It's solid. It's definitely solid, but yeah, I still think the iPhone XR looks a little bit nicer. All right, moving on to my main Android phone, we have the Galaxy S10 Plus. So obviously we have 3 lenses that we're working with here, the most out of any phone in this test. That ultra wide looks pretty good. There's a good amount of detail there. I'd have to put the iPhone 13 ultra wide side by side with this to really get a representation of what the detail looks like, but it's not overexposing, it's not doing anything stupid. It looks really solid, like really solid. Main camera looks great, good detail, good dynamic range. And this isn't even its full potential. This isn't the full 12 megapixel mode. This is the full size screen. So I think it's like 9.8 megapixels or something like that. Okay. So the telephoto camera in this shot is trying to do a reverse portrait mode photo. In that shot as well, it's trying to blur the foreground, which is very strange. Not what I was looking for. Okay, there we go. That's a little bit better. That's actually pretty good. That's definitely the best out of any of the zoom modes. I'd say the Pixel 3 XL goes up close with its digital zoom mode to that, but that's that's a good telephoto camera. I'd really like to test if this was an iQuad locked. I'd love to test my iPhone 10s and see what the telephoto camera looks like on that. But this is good. Like, that's good. So moving on to the inside shots, doing really well with low light. Biasing maybe a little bit cool, but not by much. That's a little bit better when you move on to the main camera. It's solid. And the telephoto camera actually looks really good on the inside shot. Good detail, solid dynamic range. You could really make out what you're trying to look at there. That telephoto camera is actually pretty good. Like, I could see myself using that. S10 camera is, the Galaxy S10 camera is actually really, really solid. I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10. It looks really, really good. Alright, so it's the next day. I've just been trying to work on getting some stuff done in the collection update. We're making decent progress, actually. Almost done with the with everything that isn't a phone. So that's a start, at least. So I have that. So yeah, not too bad. This is very involved, I'll say that, but it doesn't really matter. It's still all good. So yeah, but I'm gonna keep working on this. So I'll catch you later. Can someone explain this to me, please? Watch the battery indicator once this boots. Full battery. And then not. What? What? I am confused. Yeah, so it only took like 2 minutes of waiting just for me to be able to actually record on this Pixel. But anyways, that Samsung Seat clip of it acting weird was the only clip I recorded yesterday. I really didn't do really anything yesterday. It was a chill day. Kind of just wanted to take a day to myself, so that's what I did. But yeah, so it's now Friday. I'm gonna head out right now and I'm gonna go get my hair cut because I definitely need one. Yeah, it's long, so I'm gonna go get that done, and then I'm gonna go run a couple other errands, and I'll see you when I have a little less of a mop on my head. Alright, well, it took like 5 minutes just for me to get the Pixel to stop doing its dumb shit with the fucking camera. I don't even know how I'm able to record a fucking vlog on this phone, because it's painful to have to go through that shit. But anyways, I did end up getting my hair cut, and I think it looks pretty good. It is raining outside today, so it's a little bit wet, but it should be fine. I mean, I think it looks good. I needed that big time, so yeah. But I ran a couple errands. I just came over to the grocery store. So this should be my last stop before I head back home. And yeah, we should be all good. So yeah. Alright, so right now I'm just doing a little bit of phone maintenance. So a string of new iOS updates came out, so I'm doing those right now to all of my iPhones and other Apple devices that support new updates. I gotta check my Apple Watch as well and update my MacBook. So it's kind of just gonna be a long day of that. Probably not gonna do a whole lot more. Maybe do a little more work on the collection update, but maybe not get back to that until tomorrow. So we'll see. But this is our focus right now, so let's get done. Also, this was traffic about a mile from my house when I was trying to get back. This is the problem with living in Pittsburgh and just construction basically everywhere. First off, the construction crews, they're not very useful. They don't do a whole lot. They're not really repairing the roads. especially out in the rain. Like, why are they doing this out in a downpour? First off, and so yeah, that's a thing. And also, just one lane open. Construction never stops. All right, so it's the next day. Right now, I have to finish recording the narration for the collection update. I haven't even done that yet. I'm pretty far into it, but I still have like 2 sections to do and then the outro. So I'm gonna go and get that done today, just so I don't have to worry about it. So I can just breeze through editing the video. All right, so it is time for me to get to editing this week's vlog. I gotta get it up on time this week, so I'm gonna try to do that. So that is gonna be it for me in this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash the thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button down below. You guys already know what to do. Follow me on all my socials. Those are always down below, including the sports account, which I am starting to post on more. And yeah, that'll be it for me. So I'm gonna go and catch you guys in the next one. Peace.